Hello there everyone, welcome to your guide of Throt the Unclean of the Skaven. So as it is typical in these guides, I played through the initial turns and got a feel for the faction. I'll show you my conclusions and in the end provide you with some army compositions that I would try out in my own campaigns. As always, not an in-depth guide, just what I would do before starting up a campaign. Without further, here we begin with Throt the Unclean. So for your short victory, you need to destroy the factions of the Great Orthodoxy, so it is Kostaltin, and we have to destroy the Ice Court, which is Katarin. So as well as occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. Now a very short victory indeed, with lots of flexibility in terms of your next expansions. So like the initial provinces is just like this area here, very close by. And then for the other 30 different settlements, well, you can go anywhere, and that's a good part. It's kind of like a good mix between an oriented narrative campaign of sorts of destroying Kislev and a good old-fashioned sandbox campaign. So the reward is a +3 to recruit rank to all units, very useful for Skaven to ensure you have at least better recruits right off the gate, a little bit more leadership, which is always nice. So for the long victory, of course, achieve the short victory, occupy, loot, raise or sack 75 different settlements, and then you need to control at least 7 of these provinces. Now, either directly, of course, or via vassals or military allies. So these are mainly mountain settlements, but they are located all over the world. These are kind of like capitals or important cities from the Skaven or from the dwarves as well, including, for instance, Mount Gungbad here. So yeah, for the most part, it should be easy. Well, it should be normal for a long campaign to achieve this, especially considering that your main typical expansion is to just go downwards, you know, take over the empire, maybe go over through the mountains here, and by the point that you have, or they're very close to the 75 different settlements, you're already very close to this objective as well. So it's quite an average standard long campaign victory, I would say. Now the reward is +2 global recruitment capacity. It's average for Skaven, since of course you may have some units dying here and there, and of course it helps that you have a quick system to replenish, but then again the Skaven also have very quick ways of replenishing large numbers of troops, and they can recruit a large number of troops with the, you know, in provinces with a lot of settlements. So yeah, it's kind of like average. That's what I would say. Now Throt, he really likes to splice, to mutate, to multiply and destroy. So he has access to the Clan Molder's Flesh Laboratory, a unique mechanic, very interesting one. Immunity to mountain attrition is really good. Hit points +10% for all characters, so it implies that your heroes and your lords are much better. And half construction costs for breeding stocks and above. So basically that's where you build your monstrous units. That's what he gets in terms of lesser construction costs. So he plays out much differently than other Skaven lords, more into the monster side, which is so great. The mechanics alone make this a much more interesting campaign. And then to top it all off, the climate. Climate is really good. I mean, it's basically either unpleasant or suitable for the most part, which is great, and especially mountains being suitable is so good. And only really in Ulthuan will you have an issue, or, you know, in Athelloren, which is kind of to be expected, really. So yeah, it's a great campaign to have some world map domination if you choose to go for that. So your starting location is a one settlement province. Fairly defensible, but the biggest issue is how you don't get really that advantage of having, you know, local recruitment slots per settlement in the province. So the nearby provinces are either, you know, 2 settlement provinces, 1 settlement province. You do have some 3 settlement provinces to the north, but yeah, you don't get to take the advantage of the number of recruitment slots. You don't have a 4 settlement province really that close. Still, for the most part, you definitely have good choices nearby to expand because of the 3 main cities, the Prague, Kislev, and Erengrad. That means that you'll have no shortage of nearby province capitals to have your best military buildings to the fullest, which is also, you know, a good upside. So there's certainly a very unique starting location just on that regard, because you start so close to Kislev, not just the enemies, but of course the uniqueness of the 3 cities of Kislev. So, diplomacy for the Skaven is always weird, and many times it depends solely on the starting location and your enemies nearby. So since your goals actually set you against Kislev and you start at war with them, then naturally you're bound to have better relations with Chaos and others. So enemies will likely be Kislev and the Empire factions, of course, maybe even vampire counts and greenskins once you reach them. Dwarfs as well to the north, but depends if they will survive, of course. For your allies or expected allies, expect Norska and Warriors of Chaos to be the best sources, perhaps for some units from outposts. Then I'm still unfamiliar how it works to the fullest in terms of the outposts from Warriors of Chaos, but those are typical the units that they can actually build on their facilities, so that you will have some access to those. But yeah, try to get some, of course, some of their cavalry, some monsters infantry, perhaps some infantry as well. It's all up to you. Just some missiles, it's not something that you will need, because of course you're Skaven. So as for mechanics, Undercities, they're a nice idea, they provide vision, and you can generate some food and income as well from them, which is always great. It gives some good bonuses for your faction. The biggest idea, of course, is at one point you can, try to produce a Vermintide building, really, and with that the main concept is that you use several of these ones to try and get a lot of your forces, to overwhelm the opponent. Basically, that's the sort of idea. Now, speaking of food is your typical currency, really. It is important to keep fighting more to avoid penalties more than to receive buffs, really. So if you're under penalties, you can see that it's a lot of penalties, especially in terms of income and in terms of leadership, which seriously affects. So try never to go into starving for food, or even just a food shortage, really. But if you're in the green, you'll see that, yeah, it does give you some leadership, some growth, some control, but not really that much. So it's more important that you don't go under than the fact that you try to get in the buffs, really. So it also can be used when you wish to capture any settlement to turn it into a higher level, so to tier 1, 2, or 3, of course, or 4 or 5, even if you have the food, which also ensures some good strategic advantages over other factions. Now, Skaven Corruption. This allows you more uses of the Menace Below. This is an army ability that allows you to summon a unit of clan rats anywhere, and you can get additional uses of those in accordance to the Skaven Corruption, and if you spend food as well. So it does provide food. The Skaven Corruption does provide food and public order when low, and gives you public order penalties when high, but nothing too detrimental, really. For the most part, you're fine with increasing this to high all the time. An additional mechanic of sorts, let me speak here, is how the Skaven ambush right on their natural stance. So every battle has the chance to become an ambush, and some army compositions are entirely possible just because of this one, particularly with Throt, because he has a lot of monsters, and of course an ambush battle with a lot of monsters that can even vanguard, they'll be, at the enemy right when you want them. So that's always good, of course. Then we have the rights. So 4 rights, of course, is always the dominating scheme. It's very standard. This should be active as long as you wish, or as often as you can, actually. So it gives you 3 food per turn, growth in all provinces, control in all provinces, less recruitment cost. Of course, all positives, nothing really fancy, just overall campaign stuff. Then you have the 13th scheme, so more diplomatic relations with Skaven. Your lords have a chance to gain loyalty. Speaking of that mechanic, it's very simple. Don't get your lords to 1 or 0 loyalty, because then they'll have a chance that they will rebel and take their whole army with you, become a new faction. So yeah, with them, so basically be careful. Hero action success chance plus 13 and enemy hero minus 13. And then this interesting army ability, which is a regeneration area, so you do have healing, which is great, and it actually resurrects dead combatants, so you can imagine how powerful that can be for an army such as the Skaven. Then you have the Pestilence scheme, which summons a unique Plague Priest hero that can spread a deadly plague, and a unique Warlock Engineer hero with the Scheme of Doom that can either establish an Undercity or cause a an earthquake there. This is always very nice. It's just 800, just 1000 really. So by the time that you have this, by all means, just click on it, have that right, have that engineer. It always helps. It's not that costly, and of course the only problem is the cooldown duration here. So that's it for the rights. Let's speak of Throt's main mechanic, which is the Flesh Laboratory. So there are two currencies here to speak of. First, the growth fats. This is acquired mainly via passive or battles, or via buildings, for instance, as you can see there. But also acquired by recycling units. I'll showcase what that is in a moment. And then we have the mutagen. So mutagen is produced mainly via conversion of units and the growth vat. So you can also purchase this with gold via the laboratory tab. So basically, the growth fat, it gives you a batch of units and mutagen by product. So basically, once I click here, I'll empty the growth fat and it will give me some mutagen, as you can see there. And it also gives me Skaven slave spears, red ogres, and some more Skaven slaves, which is always excellent. It gave me all those units available. So that's typically the sort of idea that you must have, okay, that you can have. So that came the growth fats, and let me go back to it. Sorry, the Flesh Laboratory. So in essence, sorry, I was mentioning, I thought it was there. It's here. So these are the units that I could acquire now from the growth fat. Some good red ogres, which is nice. I'll just acquire them, and they do start already with an augment. Let's speak about the augments now. So every infantry unit, and even the Skaven slaves here that you see, can be augmented really for more stuff. Okay, so basically you have an instability chance. Okay, so while you're increasing, let me just increase this guy, for instance. Let me give him stalk and vanguard deployment. It's not really what I would go for, but still, just to showcase. And now he has that ability. He has stalk and he has vanguard deployment, and the instability chance increased. What it means is that by more augments that you add to the unit, the more you have a chance for them to become unstable. And with the instabilities, it will imply that the unit has less replenishment rate, and then it has this attribute there, which implies that it can cause severe damage to self. When the hit points are greater than 75%. So it's kind of this issue. It didn't work. It didn't work. The attempt of genetic modification didn't work. So now the unit is suffering. So that sort of idea can happen. And if you don't wish the unit, you can just recycle them and be awarded 50 growth juice. And of course, recycling means the unit is destroyed. So this is for infantry. There's a lot of them. It gives them several abilities, regeneration. So by all means, you can turn clan rats into dramatically enhanced units, but of course it costs you mutagen. When you're spending this mutagen, of course, that you need the growth fats for. So when you're spending this mutagen, you're increasing those units that you wish, but yeah, be careful with that. Now, you also have monster augments. As you can see, now it goes into the monsters, and those are slightly different than the others. So it has different abilities. For instance, you can even have the warp lightning rod with them, and the same applies. They can still become unstable, and they can still have an instability chance. So for instance, I have this red ogre, which has 4 augments really, and no instability, which is great. Then we have the laboratory. So in the laboratory, you can spend some food and some gold, basically to increase something in the campaign map. So you can, for instance, have casualty replenishment rate for those units in all armies 200%, which is crazy. We can have more recruit rank for the VAT units, for instance. You can have more growth juice gained from battles. Hey, I'm going to confirm this. I really want the sample collectors. So that sort of idea, you can get a couple of these bonuses, and you can only upgrade these after you claimed some specific number of growth fat badges, of course, because they're so powerful. So overall, this is a great mechanic. Makes the faction really fun to play as, and there are no two equal campaigns. It also ensures they can use nearly every infantry or monster unit just because of how much better they can get with the upgrades. In terms of province edicts, you have the growth and construction cost for all buildings. You also have some Skaven corruption with some food generated, which is excellent in case you're requiring food desperately. You also have recruitment cost and local recruitment capacity. This typically wouldn't be too important, but given how you don't have a lot of ways to increase the local recruitment capacity near you, maybe you'll have to do that. And also you have control and corruption. So very efficient ones. For the most part, you'll have the growth, the less construction costs, but of course you still have some ways to, generate some public order if you need, of course. In terms of the army stances, the basic one is to ambush while attacking. Of course, it does have a reduced chance of ambush because, well, you're attacking, come on, can't be the same. You also have the underway, which is perfect with all its strategy. You can move throughout different terrains, which is excellent as well. Then we have the Winds of Magic Power Reserve plus 15%, costs 10% movement. Of course, it's useful, but probably the chance to ambush attack is typically better than just some more Winds of Magic. But perhaps on sieges, this is important, or it can be used. Then we have Encamp, which costs 50% movement, allows enablers replenishment, and access to global recruitment pool, and also gives you immunity to attrition, which is the most important part. You also can raid with by costing 50% of your movement points, and generate some food, which is always excellent. If you're starving for food, just even raid your own places, it should be fine. Of course, you're going to have some issues with income, but still that food will increase. And then we have the ambush as well, so they still have this is the stay in ambush, the defensive, let's say, the waiting. It costs 25% movement, so if you want them to fall into a trap, by all means. And of course you still have forced march, the basic one. In terms of buildings, so similar to the green schemes, you have an additional recruitment capacity with each settlement in a province. So this implies your best provinces for recruitment will be like 3 to 4 settlement ones, but unfortunately there are very few with 4 settlements nearby. Even with 3, it's very few. Now, for the specific buildings, you do have 2 special buildings in Hellpit, including the resource building, which is basically just for more food, less corruption, more income, and the resource production. But you have the Depths of Hell Pit, which gives you a nice amount of food, control, growth juice per turn. Don't neglect this because it's really important for overall. Skaven corruption, then a bunch of upkeep, recruitment, and recruit ranks for Rat Ogres and Hell Pit Abomination units. And it does include some recruit rank for all provinces, which is great, and also the recruitment duration -1 turn for the Hell Pit Abomination units, because typically they take too long to build up, so now they don't cost as much. In terms of military buildings, you have 6 military buildings, 5 of which must be built in the capital for the fullest. Now you have good combos of units at tier 3, including some storm vermin, some catapults, some rattling guns, of course, some rat ogres as well. They can be effective even at point, especially in the Throt, where even your wolf rats are really nice too. So yeah, don't neglect the tier 3 units. Of course, in tier 4 you have better monsters, better infantry, better everything. Now all buildings generate income. All buildings generate income, and they also generate Skaven corruption. But what you call the infrastructure buildings, you have a growth and casualty replenishment rate alongside the income and Skaven corruption. Then we have the Warpstone reactor, giving you more food and income from all buildings. My apologies. Then we have the scrap heap, which gives you more or less recruitment cost, and diminishes all other types of corruption, which is important. This is your corruption denial building. And then I have the control generating building, Lord recruit rank faction wide, which is excellent. Hero recruit rank and Skaven and recruit rank as well of all units. So overall, very good buildings to use, decent ones. You should also consider just to unlock the specific researches that you have. Now, speaking of research, so you unlock by unlocking the specific buildings. Okay, and for the most part it's fairly extensive. They buff a lot of your units adequately, including even the initial units. So combining this with the redline skills and the mechanic from the Flesh Laboratory, you can definitely get clan rats really powerful even, and storm vermin. So don't neglect those. It can be an interesting campaign to do. And of course, it also adds many units to the Vermintide mechanic. So it adds, for instance, an extra plague catapult to the unit spawn, to the army spawn from the Vermintide. So by the time that you reach the end, maybe you can spawn a bunch of Vermintides just to have fun and to see what happens. It's always a nice mechanic to try and make it work. So as always, you have your Lord specific skills, your melee line, so do note that Throt is not a caster, so he has melee line. Then you have army or red line, and then you have blue line or campaign. Now starting with the blue line, it does not have replenishment, however most lords have a skill that is better in their specific skills. Throt is no exception, of course. Then you have also in the end, of course, maybe you want lightning strike. I don't recommend it because you do have that ambush chance while attacking, so it's kind of moot, but well, by all means you can go into it. You have reduced upkeep, and you also have more ambush defense chance, and of course over here you do have ambush success chance, so it plays out as well into the army, so maybe you want to go for those options as well, or others of course, but those are the ones that bring me in my eye basically. So then we have the red line, and it's perfect. It allows good combinations as well. Definitely one of the most interesting rosters just based on that. They have quite cheap combinations as well, such as all weapon skills units here, weapons teams, sorry, heal, all monsters here. For the most part you're going to have this one anyways, and or the infantry, of course. You can go into the infantry units, or specifically the more elite units. So yeah, and in terms of lords and heroes, there's a lot of choice, and all of them typically buff specific units. Let me show you here. Yeah, I can show you here. So you have the ancient sorcerers, you have the assassin units who replenish troops, you know, and every single one kind of does what it means. So chieftain are good to have around your infantry units, and pack masters are good to have around your monsters, because they do have some not only replenish troops but some abilities that help those monsters out. And then you have plague priests, of course. You also have warlock engineers who, you know, are great with weapons teams and with the doom flayers and doom wheels. So yeah, overall very thematic heroes, really well made, honestly, and they all have their own idea within an army, so you can have a lot of combinations just switching it up in terms of the hero that you're using there. So here are the red line skills for the Skaven. So the second line kind of mixes them all a little bit, so you might be on the lookout. You might have to be on the lookout to actually maximize your armies. So in general, have specific ones for all weapons teams and all elite infantry, which helps. Artillery is actually joined by the doom wheels, and you have a monster dedicated skill line, which of course for Throt is where you're gonna go. He does give a lot of buffs to wolf rats, rat ogres, mutant rat ogres, brood horrors, and hell pit abominations. Everything from that building, really. So you can entirely have an army just focus on that, and particularly because you're going to have the upgrades from the Flash Laboratory, by all means you can have such an army and make great use of it. You can also incorporate some infantry units, because they can also be enhanced, and of course nothing wrong with you getting just a couple of weapons teams there. This could be artillery, this could be, you know, rattling guns, whatever. Just there's a lot of variety here, so just take this with a grain of salt. When I'm seeing a rat ogre here, I'm seeing it with frenzy, I'm seeing it with a lot of different stuff that of course you're going to be able to get from the VATs or other abilities, etc. So yeah, that's the sort of idea that I want you to have. Then we have the weapons teams, typical ones, you know, either with some frontline or even disregarding frontline. Maybe you want just some heroes there instead of some infantry units. All up to you. I also include some catapults, some artillery units here, but some people just go into further mortar teams and Jezzails instead, and it works nicely. Just note how cheap and effective it is in terms of redline skills. And then we have the ninja guys. So basically this gets a lot of improvement because of the Flash Laboratory, because even your units can receive those augments, and even if not, just the monsters receiving some augments can already make this quite an interesting one. This is just an everyone got stock army, so everyone is hiding, and the enemy cannot see anything. So it's kind of a cool idea to have, you know, in terms of an army. And of course, just some basic compositions here, still using most of weapons, teams, infantry, and monsters, of course. You can still have, you know, some doom flayers, some doom wheels, as you can see there, just for extra mobility. Maybe an army just full of monsters and doom wheels would be nice. So all of those options, of course, are nice, but these are just the ones that I would use for good measure. Still a good amount of monstrous infantry that you'll definitely get the most out of your flesh laboratory. So Throt. Throt is very much unique in playstyle. You can just go into melee based forces, you can just go into monsters and infantry really, and you still have enough variety to add in a couple artillery units or weapons teams for good measure. Now his campaign is definitely filled with a lot of decision in terms of basically which units you're getting, in terms of the growth fats, you know, what upgrades are you going to unlock, what type of army do you want to have. So all that will be great to see what combinations you can attempt, and definitely one of the few lords that you'll never run out of different compositions and units, as well as every single one of them will feel completely different from the others. But for the most part, your army still consists of good infantry, great missile infantry and artillery, good monsters infantry and single entities, great heroes and varied, no flying units, there's nothing there that gives them flying, and no real cavalry. So replenishment is great. Considering the climate, heroes and mechanics, you can recover your forces quickly, giving you a great deal of momentum during your war. Now, time to set your experiments with Throt, the unclean of the Skaven.